Hey everybody, Brian Zane here. Glad you could be here for my latest interview. My guest at this time, he is the lead play-by-play man for Ring of Honor Wrestling. He's been doing that since 2017. One of the best commentators in the game today, if I may say so myself, and my good friend, Ian Riccaboni. Ian, thanks for coming on to the channel. How you doing today?
Hey, Brian, I'm doing pretty well, and we hold the distinction of calling the last match that has aired live for Honor Club together for the Ring of Honor World Championship. So, I mean, that's something that's pretty unique. And you talked about good friend. We're on the announcing team together, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's a relative newbie to the announce scene, especially with Ring of Honor, I mean, it took me a while for it to resonate with me. Like, oh crap, I was just calling a world championship match. Holy crap, I was calling a world championship match with a title change. Like, I've never thought I'd get the chance to do that. So it wasn't until like the day after or even a week later where that finally sunk into me. And now that you mention it, like, oh my God, it was the last match that's happened on ROH television or Honor Club, to be more specific. So yeah, it's been cool to be part of the history. I've been telling the last few guests I've been interviewing how much I miss the ROH experience, and I'm hoping that my seat's still available for me when things get back to normal and the shows resume.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem, Brian. I mean, you've been doing great. You've been doing great with the interviews. You've been doing great on commentary. And I think the biggest hurdle for us now is to find a way to do it safely. And what's been really great about Ring of Honor is we're not rushing. We're not making any rash decisions. We're not doing wrestling to do wrestling. We're doing it with the safety of everybody in mind. Which is something that I really appreciated. So you're safe. Your seat is safe next to Caprice and I. And yeah, I'm looking forward to being back in the saddle.
Now, you and I are part of a club where we are parents of young children in a quarantine era. So I have to ask you, you look like you still have all your faculties and you haven't gone insane. What's your secret?
My wife is, or as Borat said, my wife. Uh, she's awesome. She is the perfect mix of beauty, intelligence, everything. But she's great at coming up with activities for the kids. She has built them a cardboard airplane. She has built cardboard school buses. Anytime we get a box, if we order out for groceries or things like that, she's recycling it. She's using it as toys. We ordered a swing set with our tax return, and we ordered it about a week before the COVID-19 shutdown started to happen. So we were a little nervous that it wouldn't come, but it came about April 10th-ish. And so that's been what's been keeping us busy. I am sleeping better than I was when Ring of Honor was going. I do keep a day job as well. So I travel for that day job. I travel for Ring of Honor. So I noticed the bags under my eyes were going away. I noticed my crow's feet were going away. So it's actually been quite awesome to be home with the kids. And, again, though, my wife's been doing all the heavy lifting, and that's the true secret, if we're being honest.
Talk to me more about when, you said you bought the swing set like just before everything started shutting down. I remember very vividly when Ring of Honor started canceling everything was the weekend of the anniversary show, whatnot. Now, you were there already, correct? And you actually called some empty arena matches. What was it like calling those kind of matches? It's pretty new for ROH to have it totally empty like that.
Jay Lethal and Mark Haskins had one of the most intense matches that I've ever seen, and they did so with no one there to see it. Vicky Haskins was ringside, and the referee Todd Sinclair was there in the ring, but that was it. And that really truly shows you, I think, what good wrestling is about. And it's interesting because this is a really great time to take risks. I've been watching some of the things that WWE's been doing, that AEW's been doing, and they're finding new ways to be creative with their surroundings, and it's the perfect time to try things out. And Haskins and Jay Lethal just had a really hard-hitting wrestling match, but in a six-man tag with Grizzly Redwood, with Brett Titus, that was super interesting because they were trying out different things that we haven't even seen yet on WWE and AEW. So it's a really cool period. It wasn't, I'll say it was a lot different than calling maybe All In or calling Madison Square Garden, but it was something I won't forget.
I was fascinated when I did some research on you. You have a lot of experience in a lot of different things because you're a multi-instrument musician. You've played baseball, you've reported on baseball, and you followed wrestling throughout your childhood, and now wrestling's your job. Like, when I see someone with that many hobbies and interests, I'm like, did all those come naturally to you, like those natural curiosities, or did you just have like very influential parents growing up? Like, or was it a mix of the two?
My big brother, so my big brother Bill is 8 years older than I. He would always let me play wiffle ball in the yard with him, even though I was 8 years younger. Always let me play basketball. He was the first person that ever put on wrestling in the house. My dad doesn't really like sports. He was never really a sports guy. He was a music guy. So from the time I was 2, 3 years old, I can remember him playing along to Eric Clapton. I can remember him playing along, with different records. And that's really interesting too. As an aside, I now listen to records that he used to play to me while I was in my crib, which he only recently told me, like Elvis Costello, Marshall Crenshaw, The Knack. It's really weird. So kind of subliminal message there. But yeah, the music thing I definitely got from my dad. His sisters wrote my high school's alma mater, which is kind of funny. So the Riccaboni name is always in the program every year for graduation at Salisbury High School. He was an awesome guitarist. He opened up for Rick Derringer, who wrote Real American and the Demolition theme song. He opened up for Todd Rundgren, who produced a whole bunch of stuff and had some hit records in his own right. Head East, which did Never Been Any Reason. So my dad had a little bit of a music career playing with Veda Scott's father. They were childhood friends, and they knew one another. So Veda and I have always had this weird kinship too. We're loosely related. We have cousins that are aunts, or aunts that are cousins, or something like that. So that's how I got into music. I think secretly my dad wanted to start a rock band with me, him, and my brother, because my dad's an awesome guitarist. My brother, he taught my brother how to play the drums, and then he taught me how to play bass guitar, and suddenly we had a band. But sports, my brother taught me how to swing a baseball bat, taught me how to shoot a free throw. My mom was always super into sports. So between my brother and my mom, that's where I got my sports from. Although my mom did buy me I Want to Sex You Up, the cassette single at Kmart in 1991 or 92. So, maybe that's a musical influence too. But really supportive parents. If I wanted to do something, they found a way for me to do it. I always saw my parents working hard. We were never hungry. If I wanted to play the viola, they found a way to rent the viola from the music store or the school. I wanted to play the oboe, same thing. I played those through high school, even while doing sports. So, yeah, just super, super supportive parents. And, I always felt like I've had a safety net. And that's kind of what's allowed me to take risks and do different things, especially with my dream of calling wrestling.
Yeah, and your wrestling fandom obviously begins at a very young age. I know you've told me, and doing the research says that your family, your parents took you to a lot of shows in Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's a pretty, I think you grew up in a really good territory, and not everyone gets the luxury of being in a part of the country where not just the World Wrestling Federation, but also WCW and ECW are coming through town. Was there any particular company or wrestlers that really resonated with you as a kid going to those shows live?
Yeah, I was a hardcore WWF fan. Although I like WCW, I like ECW. We had an independent promotion called EWF that Bad Crew and Samu from Bad Crew from ECW and Samu, the head shrinker, ran. Samu would then run the very first. He would run WXW, the original WXW, now in Allentown, and so. I always went to the indie shows and things like that. I was WWF though, loyalist. I liked the Ultimate Warrior. I liked the Warlord. Like I liked the big jacked guys. And in my mind as a kid, I thought, man, if you're that big, that must mean you're a great wrestler. Like who's gonna stop these big dudes? So I always used to like to see those guys. Big Boss Man, just the guys that were gigantic. That's what appealed to me. which is funny because Ring of Honor kind of has the opposite reputation of showing some of the faster, quicker, hard-hitting stars.
Yeah, the ones who aren't quite the size of Warlord or the Warrior, for example, but they are still able to get it done in the ring for sure. Watching wrestling when you were growing up, how much did the commentary factor resonate with you? Like, when did you discover your love of broadcasting? Because I know that's what you went to school for. So at what point did you decide, I want to get into broadcasting? And how much did like wrestling growing up play a part of that?
Oh, wrestling 100% played a part of it. My mom tells me a story about, there was a, I think it was either April or May 1991, and it's Jake Roberts on the cover of the magazine. Bobby Heenan has an article, and it says, the Brains View, and the phrase broadcast journalist starts the sentence, or starts one of the paragraphs. And I asked my mom what that meant. And I was 4 years old, and I knew there were words I hadn't seen before, so I asked her what they said. And she explained to me that it was a broadcaster. She was like, that's what Bobby Heenan does. And it says in this article that he's the best. And part of me was like, well, I'm going to show him I'll be the best. And that kind of shows you what a nerd I was at 4. But I always used to get really excited. Vince McMahon, very underrated broadcaster. I just would buy into his excitement and his enthusiasm. He was excited, I was excited, and it was an event, and it was a happening, as Gorilla Monsoon would say. And Jim Ross was another guy that I love the big guys, so Dr. Death, the Steiners, Terry Gordy, Barry Windham. When those guys were wrestling and he was calling those matches, I would get hyped up with it. So those were the folks that really got me into broadcasting and really got me excited about it. As I became, I did 3 sports in high school. I ran cross country, I played basketball and played baseball. I thought, being 6 foot tall, I was always about 210, 220 pounds. I was always a little bit bigger. I thought maybe I might be able to do wrestling. And that was something that lasted about 10 minutes, the first time I ever stepped in the Wild Samoans Training Center. I went there with my friend Chris Freed, who's a comedian. He's done all kinds of cable stuff now. And we went to film a college project, and I took one bump off my back, knocked the wind out of myself, hit my head, and I said, you know what? That broadcasting thing, I really like that. I like doing stuff with my friends. I like doing the school newspaper. I like doing that kind of stuff. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be a wrestler. And so there was an exact moment where my love of wrestling had pushed me to getting thousands of hours of tapes, whether they were Wrestling Challenge, WWF Superstars, NWA Power Hour, UWF, both UWFs, UWFI, New Japan, All Japan, you name it. I had these random packages showing up to my house at the start of eBay, or at least the colloquial start of eBay in the late 90s when I had my paper out. And so it was that was something I knew I wanted to be a part of wrestling. I knew it was something I wanted to do. I thought, wow, I'm fortunate enough to be 6 feet tall. Wow, I'm fortunate enough to be big boned and be 210 pounds or 220 pounds when I graduate. Maybe I could be as big as these other guys. And if the bump didn't do it, 2 years of working out and dieting really hard to try and put on an extra 15 pounds or so. Instead, I went backwards. I actually lost weight, and I looked even smaller. And that was the other part too, where I was like, you know what? It really hurts. I'm not going to look like the Warlord. If it's not going to hurt, and if I don't look like the Warlord, wrestling's not worth doing. So I'm going to do the commentary part instead.
So you said you were looking at some UWF tapes for research. That means that Herb Abrams was an influence for you when you started doing your broadcasting?
Mr. Electricity. Well, the man back here, the Pennsylvania icon,
right.
he was part of that team. I remember that first run. We had ESPN, we had Sports Channel. So there was a time when you'd come home from school and you'd watch the GWF on ESPN, and then you flip over to Sports Channel America and you could watch the UWF reruns. So it was a crazy time. But I had a lot of those taped from when I was a kid. I never saw Beach Brawl, though, until recently.
Well, you and a lot of other people have never seen Beach Brawl until recently. I think the Dark Side of the Ring special probably put the most eyeballs on that show in a long time. So you worked your way up, I know through Future of Honor for a bit, and then you started working for ROH in 2015 as kind of like an interviewer, kind of a side talent kind of person, kind of what I'm doing now, essentially, it seems like. I know that when you started doing commentary, you worked alongside Kevin Kelly, who I will say probably goes down as one of my favorite all-time announcers. How much did Kevin help you in your wrestling, your broadcast journalism career?
A lot of the things that they don't teach you in school or in broadcasting, that's where Kevin filled in the blanks. Pacing, timing, reading a room in terms of energy, in terms of how you can help that energy be communicated to the viewing audience. And that isn't always turning your voice up to 11. It's not always getting deathly silent when there's a dramatic moment, or talking in a hushed tone. Sometimes it's the opposite. You know, if there's a dangerous moment or a lull in the match, kind of waking people back up, or if it is getting exciting, your instinct is to put your foot on the gas and have that energy and enthusiasm. And I tend to do that. But sometimes the more exciting noise is the chop across the chest. Todd Sinclair and I just rewatched. We rewatched Kenta Kobashi versus Samoa Joe, and Ring of Honor made the decision. Yeah, Ring of Honor made the decision when that match was initially released to release it without commentary, for that reason. And so Kevin taught me a lot of that stuff, and Kevin taught me a lot of different things about preparation. Just awesome stuff. And he was one of the things he did that no one would see. As I was coming up through the Monster Factory, he had met me maybe about 6 months in. I was only 6 months into the Monster Factory. I still don't know if he was joking when he asked me how old I was, and I said 27, and he said, you're probably too old. You might not make it. I think he was, but one of the things he would do is I'd send him matches. I'd find matches without commentary on Ring of Honor DVDs, which was relatively common through 2012 and 2013. They put dark matches without commentary on the DVDs, and I'd call those, and I would do the same for the Monster Factory matches and send them to him, and he would usually get back to me, and usually get back pretty quickly with feedback and with things I could learn and things I could do different. So there was that whole sequence even before we started calling matches together that really sharpened me up before I got the chance to be in the seat next to him.
So, of course, you've been most recently associated, Ian, with the commentary team you had. You had Colt Cabana on one side, of course. He's now at AEW, but you're still working with Caprice Coleman, obviously. Talk to me about the relationship and the chemistry you had with those guys. Like, what's your favorite memory with Colt on commentary? And the same goes for Caprice.
Colt and Caprice are almost the exact age of my big brother. And so they're a little bit older than I am. They both have been wrestling or in wrestling for over 20 years apiece. I think Caprice is at 24 years. I think he started when he was 16, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Colt has been in wrestling for 20 or 21 years at this point. So both are over 2 decades. And so, I really want to be deferential to their thoughts and their opinions and how they view wrestling, because they've been literally all over the world. Caprice just a few months ago was in Qatar. Colt's one of the very few American wrestlers to ever wrestle in China. My favorite memory of him, first pay-per-view we're about to do, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like my lungs were locked up. And all of a sudden I feel this big hand on my back start to rub my shoulder and said, "You got this, bud. We're going to be all right." And that's all it took. Caprice is just cool as a cucumber, man. Caprice and I have a different relationship, and that's not to say it's bad or good or both. I mean, the relationship's great. He's up for anything. If he's a little more in tune to some of the ideas I pitch, whereas Colt had a filter with things that I might want to say or not want to say. We started doing the James Brown thing with PCO. Do I have to say his name? Do I have to say his name? And that came to me one time when Caprice and I were listening to music, driving from, I think, Atlanta to Nashville or one of those trips. So he'll take a couple more risks while we're in commentary, But the thing I like about both of them is when we try things and they worked, they gave me honest feedback. When we tried things and they didn't work, came back and said, hey, you know what, that didn't fit. Let's not do that again, or let's try it different. And Caprice, what I like about him is he's really into, he's really into his family. He's such a great dad, great family member. He's always talking about his wife, his kids, and that's something that I bonded with him that I don't necessarily have that relationship with Colt. So it's pretty cool. Caprice and I have a little bit more in common in that direction.
All right, so Ian, 2 years ago, you were part of the announce team for All In, which was billed as the largest independent show of its time, although we know now I think ROH had a bit of a hand in that one. But how did you find out about All In? And, how did you find out you'd be calling it?
I'm going to unleash a couple secrets here that I've never told anybody. I think the time has come, and the appropriate people have done different things that they've wanted to do. So I think the time is now to say this. All In, you mentioned ROH having a hand in it. Obviously it was an idea. Cody and the Bucks. Mark Brown, our great producer, led me through it. Delirious, our executive producer, was in my ear all night as well. So yeah, I would say the ROH team, but it was a collaborative effort. We had folks that normally wouldn't work on the production working. Cody was on the headsets too. So it was fun. It was a fun night. The original idea was myself, Colt Cabana, and Tony Schiavone. And I was very excited because I love calling stuff with Colt. And Tony has been, I talked about Vince McMahon and JR, but Tony's my favorite commentator. And he's my favorite commentator because he has the right amount of gravitas. He's got a great voice. He peaks and valleys, all that fun stuff that a great commentator should do. But he talks to you like you're a fan, like he's a fan and you're a fan. And that's what I never tried to forget about. So it was in Nashville in, I think, January of 2018. Cody pulled me and Colt aside. He says, hey, we're doing this all in thing. We're starting this thing with Flip. The book Flip thing, but we'd like you guys to be the commentating team. And so I said, great. And he goes, Tony Schiavone's going to commentate too. And I said, great. And then we find out Tony has a Georgia football game, not going to be able to make it. And then Colt, realizing it's in Chicago, wants to wrestle. So he gets a big opportunity in the Battle Royal. So all of a sudden I'm by myself in the commentary team. And I talked to Nick and Matt, the Young Bucks, and I throw out the name Excalibur, and they obviously know Excalibur for years and years and years and years, and suddenly that's a match, and we're off to the races there. Don Callis, I understand, is great friends with Kenny Omega. Somebody says, hey, would you mind Don Callis calling the show with you and Excalibur? And I say, no, that sounds great. And so that formed the team there. It's intense, man. It's one thing, I thought we'd hit the big time when we called Cody and Kenny and Marty Scurll versus Dalton in front of 6,600 people or 6,700 people a few months earlier. There's a big difference between 6,600 and 10,000, and you don't realize it until you're there and you're doing it. And Vladimir, the super fan, like everybody who is anybody in wrestling, including the fans, were there. So it's just a wild, wild night, and I'll never forget it. My favorite part of that night, obviously, is landing the plane. We were running out of time, and we were running out of time fast. And I got my happy wrestling in as the credits faded to black. One of the things looking back, and only within 6 months after the event, you realize that something like that might not ever happen again. You had stars from, AAA, Pentagon, Phoenix. You had Rey Mysterio Jr., who was very quickly re-signed by WWE. You had Ibushi. You had Kenny Omega. You had Marty Scurll. You had Jay Lethal. The list goes on and on. Everybody in the women's match ends up being signed by a major organization within a week, I think. I mean, it was crazy. Stephen Amell, who's a big-time actor, wrestled. It's just to think about the pieces that had to go right and the pieces that had to come together for that. I don't think that it might not happen again. I say that because we're all friends and we're all still friends. And I think under the right circumstances, something special could happen again. And I think there's hope out there. I don't want to say for All In too, but I think there's hope for something that could bring people together. And when it's safe to be all together again, that would be a heck of a cherry on top to put together something with Ring of Honor, with AEW, with Impact, with can you imagine if CMLL and AAA came together, at least sent one person a piece? Like that would, I mean, that might be world peace worthy, right there.
If we can negotiate, one person from each company coming up to something in America, then yes, maybe there is hope for, North and South Korea after all. Everything, one thing leads to another. I'm going to jump way ahead in the timeline here because there's one thing I want to ask you about, and that was the fact that you are undefeated in in-ring competition in Ring of Honor. You took part in a 10-man tag team match at Unauthorized. That was in, I want to say, Columbus, Ohio last year. And your moment was the big Macho Man elbow drop onto Brian Johnson, the Mecca. What was going through your mind when you were 10 or so feet in the air coming down with that elbow?
I hope I don't die. So that elbow was the most serendipitous thing that's ever happened. Colt had asked me in England, would I want to wrestle? And that was only like a week or two before that. And I said, yeah, I mean, I can take a bump. I'm like, somebody can slam me or somebody can chop me or, He goes, no, can you do an offensive move? And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, like a leg drop. Like a Hogan leg drop? Yeah, a Hogan leg drop. And I said, you know what? I can't. Like my leg, like it's weird. Like that's a move I used to try and do in the pool and I always used to mess up and like my legs don't do that. But I was like, I can do the Randy Savage elbow drop. And he goes, no, you can't do the Randy Savage elbow drop. And I said, yeah, I can. He goes, can you do it from the top? And I go, yeah. You go, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it from the top. I'm not going to do it from the first rope or the second rope. I'm going to go all the way up. So the person responsible for getting me into shape, quote unquote, shape for that. And I've actually lost about 25 pounds since that happened. And I was very svelte at the time. This quarantine's been very, very good to me. I've been eating right and I've been avoiding fast food. But TK Orion says, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. Come with me. Standing up on the top rope is one of the most core intensive things I've ever done. It is incredibly underrated. You see Macho Man go up and he goes straight up with the hand, or Jay Lethal straight up with the hand. That not only is it scary, it's extraordinarily difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult. So I just stood there and he said, just breathe. He goes, just breathe, look down at the mat and breathe. And we were doing visualization techniques. I felt like I was in like a sports psychology office. I do it. I do the little Macho Man hook, which was just instinctive because when you're a kid, you see him do that. And when you have the wrestling buddies, you just do it hundreds and hundreds of times. And I made this loud pop, the mat pops and the ring pops. And I look up and I see Joe Koff just staring a hole in me. As the Ring of Honor COO, and Greg Gilliland, who's the general manager, and Greg was having a tough week, and he looks over and he goes, Ian, just whatever you do, just be careful. I was going to stand up and try and straighten up, but instead we thought it would be funnier if we did kind of like if I used Colt as sort of like when the Rockers used to do the thing where they would jump off their shoulders. We made it look like that, or tried to, and the British Bulldogs did that too with the flying headbutt. Davey Boy was on the bottom, Dynamite on top. So yeah, we did that. In reality, he was the fail-safe mechanism. If I chickened out, he was going to gently place me on Brian Johnson. So that was the backup plan.
Well, it's a good thing that the plan A worked because, that was a picture-perfect elbow drop. And, speaking from someone who was in the back watching that, and everyone, it was a locker room sellout, that match. Seeing Todd and Gary Juster getting involved and you with the elbow drop. Oh my God! People, I think the backstage area was louder than the audience in attendance for that match. That was pretty amazing. Last thing I want to ask about is I know that giving back to the community is something that's very important to you. I know you've kind of been a big part of the ROH Cares movement. I know that you've done some work on the local level as well, and I know that literacy is a big thing in particular. I know you've done book drives at ROH shows. Like, talk to me. Why is literacy one of your focuses? Like, what is that? How is that important to you?
As a dad, Brian, it was crazy seeing what reading, just reading to Zach was able to do. And now that he's able to detect some letters and words and start to read on his own, and put together what's happening, it's crazy what that unlocks. And it's crazy what it unlocks in the mind as it's happening, and to see those connections. Those moments are priceless for me, for seeing Zach get that, and now Nora starting to recognize letters and numbers, and just those early stages again. It's so much fun to go through it a second time. It's so cool to see them learn and enjoy that. So two of the big literacy things I do, I always do Read Across America at Roberto Clemente Charter School in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And that's my hometown. I got the Iron Pig sweatshirt on, big Pigs fan, but Read Across America is folks from the community come in, and they don't have to be famous on any level. It can be a community leader. It can be somebody's parent. But the idea is to come in and share their favorite book. And each year I bring Colt Cabana's Wrestling Dreams, and I read it to Mr. Seibert's class there, the phys ed teacher. And it's a lot of fun. And so I've been doing that. I've done that for the last 3 years. And then recently, like you mentioned, we did a book drive for Lehigh Valley Reads in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And it's super cool to partner with. They work with the United Way of Lehigh Valley and PBS 39 out of Lehigh Valley also. We were at a pumpkin patch, and they gave Zach a Superman book, a Batman book. And I was just blown away that there's an organization that just gives away books. And he took that book home. He paged through it in the car. We got home. We read through the book. The next day we went to, or maybe a day or two later, we went to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms game. He took the book with him. He made me read it to him during the hockey game. The next night we read it for bed. We woke up, we read it again. And that's the kind of power that these books can have when you really tap into something kids love. So that simple act of generosity, I was like, we can afford this book. Why are we taking it? Why am I not finding ways to get books into folks that might not be able to buy books, or might not be able to physically get to the library, or might not physically be able to secure the resources in the journey of reading? So that's why that's become so important for me. Allentown is Allentown in the 1970s and 80s was a place that a lot of people gave up on. Right now, even through COVID, we're seeing a lot of people come together, and we've been really fortunate, whether it is, the big hospital systems that employ a lot of folks, the big colleges and universities. It's become kind of a healthcare town, but we've also have fun stuff again. We have minor league baseball, minor league hockey. We have a big casino, for better or worse, whatever thought is on that. So it's becoming a town where people kind of want to come to. And the next spot is, how do we set up the next generation to keep this momentum in the Lehigh Valley going? So that's why it's super important to me. And more breaking news, you're going to hear it here first. Coming out for Pride Month, there is a limited edition Ian Riccaboni Ring of Honor Micro Brawler coming. You'll be able to find it on ROHWrestling.com, ROHProShop.com, and Pro Wrestling Tees. And proceeds will be going to the Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is an organization that's doing very important work all the time, but especially right now during the pandemic. It's helping LGBT youth from Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, all over the Lehigh Valley, with literacy, with school, with emotional support, with everything. They do a lot of cool exhibits. They do a lot of cool, they have a lot of cool talks as well. And I'm really happy to be partnering with them. We did a t-shirt last year on ROHWrestling.com, Happy Wrestling with the Pride flag. And, this year as an ally, very excited. I know there's folks in Ring of Honor who identify as LGBTQ. I know there's folks that have confided in me that they identify as LGBTQ. This is a small gesture for me to say, wrestling is, can be, and will be for everybody. And, I hope others, it's exciting to see others take this. And I'm so, I'm really honored that we're able to do something like this and put the Ring of Honor logo on it, to put the Pro Wrestling Tees logo, and to put Bradbury Sullivan Community Center's name front and center on the packaging.
Well, you're doing some great work with that, Ian, for sure. Thank you very much for taking the time with this interview. Before we go, do you have anything you want to plug besides the stuff you just mentioned?
No, I mean, I'm on YouTube. I'm going through a bunch of weird stuff in my basement right now. It's like the world's worst antique roadshow, because nothing I have is valuable and nothing I have is worth anything. But it's fun to open it up and kind of relive part of my childhood a little bit. And I have a Warlord. I have an LJN Warlord, and that's like the big thing that are in these boxes. And not even from a monetary standpoint, like that's probably the most valuable thing that I own, other than my LJN Ultimate Warrior that I bought after the fact. But that's the most valuable thing from my childhood, and it's there somewhere. So it's like a treasure hunt that I do over on my YouTube, youtube.com/Riccaboni. I got about 14 boxes left. It's in there somewhere. When am I going to find it? I don't know, but that's my quarantine project.
In the end, it all comes full circle back to the Warlord. Well, Ian, thank you so much for this interview. And yeah, thanks for being here.